Hello and welcome to the Product Opscast with Graham Reed and Antonia Landy. Very excited to be joined by Stephanie Leue, well-respected product expert, formerly at Doodle, Eurospace, and now at Ringier. Stephanie, also want to let you explain a little bit about your background and your very exciting projects coming up as well.
Happy to. Thanks for having me in your podcast. I'm super excited for today's session. I'm Stephanie. I'm in product for almost 2 decades. I'm still passionate about it. Don't ask me why. It just is what it is. I moved the ladder up from being a product owner towards being CPO. Enjoyed every single role. I've seen everything from waterfall to agile to AI to Scrum to Safe to whatever frameworks you name them. I've seen them. And I love the variety of product. And I think that's also what's helping me to keep the lights on. Meanwhile, I'm serving as a CPO at Ringier, but I'm going to leave that role soon. Finally entering the coaching space like many others as well. So welcome to the club. And I'm looking forward to my near future.
Today, we are chatting about the product leader operating system and the competing dynamics and demands of the product leader role that make this operating system vital. And Stephanie, I know that you wrote about this in some detail very recently. Do you want to kick us off by describing a little bit more about what those dynamics and those demands are and where they come from before we then start to dive into your operating system?
Me too. I think we're not talking enough about product leadership, to be honest. I think there are many courses and trainings and some articles and some books from like 20 years ago, but I haven't really seen anything that is up to date or reflecting my own experiences and reality. So I try to understand, like, what is it even that I'm operating in right now as a product leader? And I felt that there are 4 competing forces in which we're operating. It's on the one hand, the relationship to your C-level, like the CEO, the chief of sales, the chief of marketing, all the people that do have a say in the company strategy. And especially if you're in a CPO role, obviously these are your peers, aside the CEO, who's your manager. And there are always competing goals and objectives. And usually you do have a lot of friction on these tables. And if you're not managing these friction very well, and if you're not building strong bonds with your C-level, you will have hard times protecting your team from constantly shifting priorities and ideas and the so-called hippo effect, right? And I think we're not talking enough about how to manage it. We're talking a lot about the hippo effect, and we're talking a lot about the dribble down effect and shifting priorities. But I barely do see information or trainings on how to actually manage these relationships upwards. That's the one thing. Then there's another thing that is quite common, not only in my own experience, but also in the coachings I'm doing. And it's the friction between CTO and CPO. Actually, in a perfect world, there is always friction, but it's a healthy friction. But in most environments, the friction between CPO and CTO is not healthy at all. And then that has massive impact on engineering and product teams, because if the CTO and the CPO speak different languages, they also communicate in different ways to their teams. And that means that usually there is a lot of conflict between the teams as well, which they can't solve themselves just because their leaders are not aligned at all. And I think as a chief product officer, but also as a product leader, you always need to also make sure that you do have very strong relationship to your engineering peer, I'd say. The third thing is the managing down aspect, like all your product managers, right? Like we're expected to coach our product managers. We're expected to upskill them and to be the perfect leader and to guide them and to be strategic. But if you're operating in a system that is full of friction, usually your product managers do have to face that friction as well. And then your one-on-ones suddenly turn into psychology sessions or therapy sessions, and it's no longer about coaching. And so you try to improve and you try to be the leader that you're reading about everywhere in social media and the books. But it is so hard just because you're constantly facing all of the challenges that your team is experiencing. And that entire system of like managing up, having struggles with your C-level, managing sidewards, experiencing friction with your CTO, but then also managing downwards and experiencing challenges with your PMs, for many people leads to the situation where they start losing their confidence. Because if you're just experiencing friction everywhere, how do you want to be a confident leader? So suddenly you're experiencing challenges with your confidence. You seem to be a weaker leader to everyone, and then you open the doors to everyone to step into your role, and everyone is kind of overruling you, right? And so that's kind of a flywheel. So you try to be strong in all directions, you start facing challenges, you start doubting yourself, and then suddenly things just get worse and worse, and you're not managing proactively the whole system any longer, but you're more in a reactive state, and then you're not the leader you want to be. And that's what I'm trying to solve.
Wow. Antonio, any thoughts to kick us off?
I mean, I think it's actually the perfect distillation of what many CPOs and product leaders go through. And Stephanie, as you were talking, I really love that you're also bringing the self into this, right? Because in order to be that strong leader, you need to have a, basic self-belief that you belong in that role, you're doing it to a certain degree of competence, right? And that you are the right person for it. So I'm really glad that not only are we talking about how is your relationship with the CTO, how is your relationship with your C-level peers, but also how do you, manage these endless therapy sessions where there's always just something else that is the new kind of friction of the week, right? We're also talking about how do we manage oneself and how do we show up as leaders in our discipline.
Is this unique to CPOs, to product leaders, or is this something that all C-suite executives have, that they suffer from? And if not, what is it that is unique about this in the CPO world?
Yeah. Well, I can't speak for all CPOs, obviously. I can only speak for myself and for the ones I'm coaching. I wonder if this is a pure CPO problem. I wouldn't say so. Being a product manager myself, I think the friction is the same. Obviously, not on that higher strategic level and not as impactful on the entire organization. But even as a PM, you do face the same friction, right? If you're not best friend with your tech lead, then you won't deliver things as fast as you can if you are working in a fully functioning team. If you're not best friend with your data peer or with your design peer, then you won't build the great products that you're supposed to build. And then same thing happens. You might lose your self-confidence just because you can't execute the way you want to or the way you think you have to because that's what you've read in the books. You just have no clue on how to implement it. So I think it touches all levels actually. But the impact on the entire organization grows the higher you climb the ladder.
I want to come back to this idea of the relationship between you as product leader or CPO and the people you're managing, because I think this is something where we in product ops can absolutely learn a lot from, not only product ops leadership, but also this kind of idea of having therapy sessions, right? Like one of the first things I think any good product ops manager or person would do is have a listening tour. And that is just, exposing yourself as much as possible to other people's problems to say, where is the friction? What's not going well? How can I help? And I think even there, and this comes absolutely from personal experience as well, that can often, it's like a bell curve, right? You get to a maximum point of effectiveness or efficiency and kind of absorbing other people's complaints or problems. But then at some point it becomes detrimental. And at some point you are just kind of like the dumping ground, if you will, right? For every single little piece of interpersonal friction or, well, I think this is dumb. I think this should work another way. So I think there is a little bit of an affinity between product ops folks and product leaders in the way that we engage with the daily frictions or daily realities of the people executing the work.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And all the product ops leaders and people I work with usually always face the same challenges. And it's based on exactly the thing that you just described. When you start the role, you start bonding with people. So you try to build trust, you listen to them, they share all their problems. But then at the same time, your role is not a therapist, right? Like your role is, in a perfect world, kind of a neutral coach helping teams to become high performing. But then if you want them to become high performing at some point in time, you also need to share the challenges of the teams and the individuals with the leaders. And that's the point in time where you usually also leave this neutral space. And I think that's super challenging because you can't be neutral when you're always in the middle between the people working on the ground and the people leading the other people. And as a leader, I think it's somewhat similar, right? Like you want to be neutral because you can't compare one PM with another. You can't just listen to your PMs because you need to have a 360-degree view on why things are happening. So you also need to listen to engineering and to design and to their complaints as well. And then you need to try to paint the picture of like what happened and is it emotional or is it a process or is it a people problem? So you always try to be neutral in the product ops role, but also in the leadership role. But it is super hard and it requires a lot of self-awareness actually to stay on that neutral ground. And I think that's what unites us in product ops and in product leadership. And that's why we also have to work so close together.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. Just a final point on this. Like, I think eventually you actually have to get out of that neutrality because as somebody in product operations, you need to form an opinion on what the next best way forward is. And that opinion is not going to be everybody else's opinion. It's not going to be everybody else's favorite path. So at some point, inevitably, you do switch roles, right? You come out of this, share everything with me, here for you, right? I used to say, oh, I make your life easier. Why wouldn't you want to bond with me? Why wouldn't you want to tell me everything that's going on that I might not have eyes on? But at a certain moment in time, you have to come out of that role and say, okay, this is what we're doing today so that we can achieve our ambitions tomorrow. And you lose that neutrality. And I think that's very difficult.
That's true. But actually, I think that's super important as well, just as you described. And one thing that I try to do is to be super explicit about me changing roles so people are not surprised. And then I think you can maintain your neutrality as long as you're open about the hat you're currently wearing. And that again requires a lot of self-awareness, right? Because you need to pre-warn people like, look, now I'm not neutral any longer. Now I'm radical candid with you. So I'm putting on another hat and here's my opinion. And so people do understand that you have to fulfill different roles in order to move the organization forward. But at the same time, if you're not explicit about it, then you're ambiguous and then people will start losing trust in you. And you can't afford it, neither as a product ops leader nor as a CPO or product leader at all.
On a similar vein to that, and I've just written something down as you were both speaking. What in your experience has been the expectation of you coming into a new role as a product leader? Has it been to bring yourself, your experience, your way of working to a team, or has it been, hey, come in, lead the team, but under, within the same bounds of what the company has already kind of set out? Are you somebody, or have you traditionally been somebody that's been expected to come in and bring your way of working and change everything, or you change your way of working to meet what the business kind of has already had? Because there's an interesting connotation with that. Is, so many companies kind of love the culture that they've got and they've built it up, but something's not working still. So, which one's going to give? Is it going to be the very traditional way that we've always been working, and bring something in new? Or no, we don't want to change that, but you've still got to change how we're doing things. Do you see what I'm saying?
This question is almost impossible to answer, actually, because there are so many variables which you need to consider. I think if you're in a VP or director level, you're potentially still hired for your leadership skills or your skills to deliver value fast, and you're not really hired to transform an entire organization. And in my own experience, for me, what happened is that when I got hired into director roles, it happened twice that I got promoted into CPO roles because I showed the ability to transform an organization into different ways of working. So that came natural, but I was not hired with the expectation to transform the organization, but because I showed the skills and I started transforming the organization anyways, because I didn't care whether there were any expectations or not. I just wanted to improve. That is the one path into my roles, at least. And then later in stage, when I got hired as CPO directly into roles, I think I got hired because I'm known for transforming organizations, right? And maybe the expectations weren't even clear when we started interviewing, but then during the interviews, it might have become clearer that there is a skill in me that you can hire in order to move forwards or towards a better product organization. And I think this is maybe unique to me. It might look completely different for different leaders. But what I can tell from my experience is that the higher you climb the ladder, the less expectations you are facing, because people just expect you to act like a C-level, right? And that doesn't mean like transform the organization. It doesn't mean whatever, lead the team or coach them. It just means help us to move faster and deliver more value.
Yeah, interesting. It seems like it's a very dynamic set of pressures that's constantly in flux, constantly changing. And how do you manage that? How do you keep up with that?
Question. I wouldn't say I do every single day, right? Like the role is full of ups and downs, obviously. Sometimes I'm also quite reactive just because I'm sitting in back-to-back meetings and everything's burning all around me. And because it's burning, people also throw more bombs into the burning fire, which is excellent. And then like I'm not mastering leadership at all, right? I mean, who am I to tell you that product leadership is always perfect? But I think what I learned is to not stress myself out, because usually it's always just a very limited period in time. Maybe it's a day, maybe it's a week, maybe it's 2, maybe it's 3, but usually it's no longer than like a month, right? So we will survive that, and that's fine. That helps me to not get stressed at all. Number 2, I think I meanwhile am super fast in recognizing when things shift, when people get more stressed, when fires start burning. And when I was younger or earlier in my career, I potentially got stressed myself because I wanted to help everyone, right? And that puts a lot of burden on a leader's shoulders. And you can't help everyone and you can't de-stress everyone. But you can care for yourself and you can stay centered and you can manage your own stress levels. So what I usually do in very stressy times is I just double down on my own health. Like I do more sports, I eat healthier, I go to bed earlier, I skip more meetings. Sounds totally counterintuitive, but it's like with raising kids, right? I mean, I have 4 children. If I'm not centered, this will be a super chaotic setup here in my house. Like no one will benefit from that. Same in business. If I'm a leader, I need to stay centered. I need to look after myself. If I look after myself, if I'm not stressed, people usually also get less stressed, or they leave the stress zone faster than if I'm also in that stress zone as well.
That such amazing tips. Stephanie, I'm curious though. Like you've been a friend to the product ops community, let's say, for a very long time. I think we've always had very insightful chats about the role of product operations in all of this. So I think my question is, how can we help?
Product ops to me is the most important role in a product, actually, but also the most underestimated role. And I think my experience routes back to my time at Contentful, where I worked with 3 really excellent agile coaches. Back then, agile coaches weren't called product ops, but they've done exactly that role, right? Like they were neutral coaches to all the teams. They helped to overcome conflicts. They help to improve processes. They help to fix data gaps. They help to be the glue between the teams and the leadership. They called out friction. They called out gaps. And they were so essential to Contentful back then and to us being able to run a high efficient product organization, product and engineering organization, obviously, that since then I'm super convinced that this role is just extremely important, while at the same time, I'm not sure if there is the one unified definition of product ops, and maybe my definition is a little bit different than the definition from others. Because to me, product ops is not a pure like process role or like help us to get data or help us to introduce Scrum. I think many treat product ops like this. To me, it's really like the glue role, the one role that is like almost everywhere, that has their ears and eyes everywhere, that is always radical candid, while at the same time being able to thrive in high paced environments. And yeah, whenever I start a new role, the first thing I'm trying to do is to establish a product operations team, or at least empower product managers to do a fair share of product operations in their day-to-day business. That was my love letter to you.
There we go. We as an amazing testimonial there for product ops. I think there's so much alignment with what you've just said for sure. Antonio and I that do this day in and day out. But I think one of the things you said there was it is different everywhere, and it's actually fine. Antonio and I talk about this so much about how much the definition of the role has condensed over the years. Now it's kind of aligned fairly well, but that doesn't mean it should be. It shouldn't be like the Agile Manifesto. It shouldn't be. This is exactly what it's going to be in everywhere, and you will do this. Otherwise, you're not doing product ops, because I think the thing that we've learned from over the years about trying to do that is that every business is different. Every business takes something different from it. And by what we now approach this as is coming in and saying, what does product ops need to be here, rather than how does here change to be product ops? Coming at it from the opposite direction, I think is really good to hear. Anything you want to say on that, Antonio?
I mean, not really. I think Stephanie, you put it perfectly right. And I think we're very much aligned that product ops really has such massive potential in organizations to help them transform. And I'm not sure every single organization with product ops is realizing that potential, right? I think there are still a fair number of product ops folks out there who are mainly administrative or mainly operational, let's say, which is a kind of a catch-22 of, I think, the name of our role, right? But I think once you understand that what we hope to give you as CPOs especially is leverage, right? Organizational leverage for positive transformation. I think at the end of the day is how we can put it. And I think once you realize just how much you can do by partnering closely with somebody who has de facto kind of eyes and ears everywhere, right? I think product ops folks end up being the people that see and hear the most or have the most context, purely because of the nature of our work and purely because of being exposed to many different parts of the company. Once you realize that this is somebody you can closely partner with and you can really take advantage of, I think, as a product leader. And we've seen this in a past podcast episode, right, with Thor Mitchell. He said product ops didn't change my work, it changed my life. Right. I think we can, going back to the four tensions you mentioned, right? I think it can touch upon all of those aspects. And if I, as a product ops leader, can give my product leader time back and they get more time to center themselves, right? Like you mentioned, that is a net positive for the entire company.
Totally. Yeah, and it's not just about giving time back. It's also about escaping this reactive state of leadership, because you can hand over things like conflicts between team members in a team to product ops, because they can solve much better than you can do as a leader, right? Like if C-level enters the room and says like, why are you fighting with each other? Well, it might not end up super positive, but rather strengthening conflict. There is one thing that I would love to hear from you as well, because I wonder, we're not talking about product leadership any longer. We're talking about product leadership in the age of AI. And to me, product leadership in the age of AI requires even more product ops than ever before, because suddenly it's no longer about just polishing the org a little bit and like becoming better at discovery and like doing a little bit more data, but it's really about speeding up processes like never before. And I haven't read much about how product operations can help product leaders to become product leaders in the age of AI. And I would love to hear your opinion on that. You're both smiling. So you do
Graham,
have
I'll
an
leave that
opinion.
one up to you. Absolutely. I think you've done some amazing work.
Yeah, it's interesting because the first reaction I think many people would have is, the understand AI and product operations would say, well, surely AI is going to take some of these jobs away from product ops. Are we going to have a product ops bot that can partner with the product leader? And yeah, do you know what? Maybe in some businesses and at some point, yeah, maybe they will do. But I'll tell you what I've been working a lot on where I am right now. We're a little behind, I suppose, other businesses about using AI. We're very much in the kind of experimenting. We're trying to find out a lot more about what it can do for us, and so we're doing things like building skills, to user stories, PRD, strategy docs, things like that. And my teams are all experimenting on their own, and we've got communities of practice coming together, and we're making rapid progress. But everyone's at a different level, and we're all just experimenting with the cool stuff. We're experimenting with the stuff that kind of, it will save us that job. And what's not happening is we're not looking at this very holistically. We are not saying how is everybody going to use this in kind of their own context across all of our different squads. We're not looking at this from a business perspective. And only last week, certainly at the time of filming this, we started to look at how is the wider business going to be using AI to do things like ask questions about where is our product, what are the capabilities of our product, what's the medical, we're in a medical business, what are the medical connotations to what we're building, to what we're producing in terms of our physical products as well. And so we're now starting to look at things like shared context around the business, really well curated and verified context about what our business is, what our products are, how they operate, how they work, how they interconnect. What I see so many businesses doing is going off and having real fun with AI, building a lot of things in silo, and then there's no verification behind anything that we've done and built. And so we're then trusting AI that is like a child that's gone through school, and we're hoping that the schooling and the teaching that they have had is correct, is going to work for them. And there's nobody that's looking at this and taking a very kind of critical eye and saying, are we doing this in the right way? Is anyone checking their homework? Is anyone checking that AI is actually producing the things we expect it to do? And so what I'm now doing, and what I see a lot of product operations professionals doing, is now taking a very critical eye over this very excited AI phase and saying, is this correct? Or do we need to go and check this? We need to verify. We need to make sure there's centralized work that only a few people maybe have access to. We're building these contexts, we're building this memory, but are the right people building it? Are the right verifications happening in all of this? And is it something that we are then enforcing product or the wider business to all be shared and sharing the use of? So that's where I see product ops playing still that very, very vital role with AI and supporting in the smaller context product leaders to make sure those things are happening. Because as we have said so many times on this podcast, Antonia, time is such a luxury for product leaders that they wouldn't have the time themselves to do that. There isn't anybody in a business that is spending the time doing those verification checks on things like AI. And that's where product operations has a critical role to play.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I would even go one step further and say that product leadership has never been messier than in today's AI world, actually. And product operations has never been more important than in today's world. I mean, imagine, I think the standard situation in almost every company right now. Your design leader starts automating prototyping with whatever tools. They prepare code so front-end teams only have to push the release button and suddenly more or less great or crappy products go live. Your sales team starts prototyping themselves on Lovable, pushing things live, promising new features to your customers. Your customer success team is automating their entire customer feedback intake channels, and they are suddenly expecting you to listen and read all the feedback and build the features. And then all of the other teams are coding and vibe coding and building stuff themselves. Even your CEO starts typing things, right? And then you are sitting in the one-on-one with your CTO and he's like, guys, are you crazy? None of that is scalable. None of that is compliant. None of that is working with our existing customer base. We have to do a full stop here and build everything from scratch. And then you as a product leader suddenly have to go out to all the people and say like, hi, your thing looks so nice. But unfortunately, we have to roll it back because it's not compliant. So your role is even more reactive than ever before because suddenly everyone in the org is empowered. And that sounds like a very dark scenario, but if you turn it around, it's also a super exciting scenario because the entire organization now is ready for some product thinking. But if you're just like herding cats as a product leader in today's time, you're more reactive than ever. Your job is messier than ever. Your team is more stressed than ever. And you can't even measure any of the things that all of the other teams pushed live just because no one ever thought about implementing tracking it all, right? And that's the spot we're in today. Like product leadership suddenly is herding cats on steroids. And you can't master product leadership any longer if you're not trying to stay ahead of the curve, or if your week has not 120 plus hours, which unfortunately my week has not.
Yeah, I think it's very, very interesting. And I love that we're having this conversation in this round because AI is a tool, but more than any other tool that we've ever integrated in our companies, AI needs guardrails and AI needs integration into the way you work specifically. And I think what becomes vital, not just important, like absolutely vital to survive the implementation, right, of these AI tools is better decision making. It's the fostering of better decision making. It's saying at scale, this is what you can use this AI tool for. This is what it's really good at. These are the guardrails we've given it so that we know its basic levels of competent, right? This is how we will evaluate whether what it has produced is of any value to us as an organization. And this is how we will actually test, adopt, and scale it. And I think putting it this way, Stephanie, you're totally right. Product ops is more important than ever because if everybody just runs free, it's exactly the nightmare scenario you mentioned.
Yeah, and what you describe, Antonia, again, sounds nice in theory, and I would agree. I totally would love to have these guardrails and AI stuff and whatever. But reality, and I think we all know, looks completely different. Reality looks completely different today. We were always the bottleneck for all other departments. And I recall, and that's it's 8 years ago at Contentful. I recall the marketing department hired engineers and I was shocked. How dare they? I mean, engineers, that's product. They can't just hire engineers, but they did. And suddenly we were not their bottleneck any longer, right? I think in many other companies, product still is exposed or at least would be described as bottleneck from all other departments. Now AI comes and now all other departments can build. Why would any of the sales or marketing or customer experience leaders listen to product and say like, just implement a very lengthy process. We listen to all of your requirements and we hold all of the things back because your product there might be companies out there that function like this, but I doubt that this is more than 3% of all companies, right? And that's the reality we're in as product leaders. Like and going back to my operating system, that's again where the friction now becomes even more visible because how do you want to hold back the other teams from building cool stuff if there is no real reason to do so? And if there is no proof that you are right in how you build products and they are wrong.
This
Yeah,
is really interesting, and I've been writing some bits and pieces down. And yes, please, by the way, please do carry on talking if my internet keeps cutting out as well. There's a mindset change here that is so vital. Being able to kind of vibe code, CS teams, marketing teams, vibe code in their own platforms and interfaces and blah, 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 blah. Great, go for it. The guardrails here are, and the mindset changes, we are experts in all our own particular fields. I've been working at Helios with our social media team, the team that kind of produces all of our social media content. And I'm rapidly coming up to speed just with their terminology and how they work. Some of it, I'll be honest with you, and if you're watching this, Laura, some of what you do seems very balmy to me. but it clearly works because you are very, very successful. Would I turn around and say, yes, I will go and actually take over running social media, et cetera, and do it successfully? Not in a million years. It's not my field. So all of a sudden with AI, we're now in the position whereby other professionals who are very skilled at what they do feel that they can produce to the same quality that our product and design and engineering teams can do. Firstly, we know that's barmy. You know, we have expertise and we have that right eye over things like security and compliance and integration, et cetera, et cetera. So my very flippant term, you know, the I would respond to this is, well, if a business thinks they can do it, why aren't they? Why are they not having their CS teams? Why are they not having their sales teams just vibe code things and then hitting the publish button and running it out there? To those CEOs who think they can go and do that, and they think that, well, you know, our teams are doing this, so you know, what's the bottleneck? Okay, well then let them push the button and see the reaction on their face, because how many of those business leaders would be very comfortable with that happening?
Good question. I feel like business leaders are super comfortable with that happening, at least many of the business leaders I talk to, because it's a huge opportunity. And I don't feel like it's a mindset shift. Like I rather feel like product positioned itself as the blocker, as the bottleneck in the past 20 years, always, because we were always the ones that executed, that owned the platform, that talked about tech debt and scalability and compliance and customers facing bugs. And we tried to create systems that deliver stable platforms, stable experiences, great experiences for a reason, right? Because what we're building is finally what users are going to use. So someone needs to have the final say in here. But I feel like we too much talked about the processes and we too much were holding everyone back, and we too much tried to convince everyone that you need to do discovery, you need to measure, you need to follow process X, Y, Z. We talked a lot about processes and outcomes and hypothesis and discovery, and all of that is important. Don't get me wrong. I'm a huge fan of all of that. I just feel like we lost all of our stakeholders on that journey because they do have their specific language as well. So because of our language and because we were always trying to convince everyone that we need to work the way that product wants to work, we lost them. We were perceived as the bottleneck. And now suddenly everyone is empowered to do things themselves, and they can bypass product because they can release stuff just themselves. So they do. And now we panic because we're trying to herd cats and we're trying to tell everyone like, oh, you can't do it like this. And I think that's just the wrong approach, because the first thing we would need to do is to understand that all the other departments do a very great job with lots of experience as well. And it's not us teaching them how to do product. It's all of us finding common ground. And I wonder if we potentially just missed that point years ago. And now it's definitely time to fix that.
I actually absolutely agree. I think we did miss the boat on that. I think in the past, decade, I think we drifted further apart rather than coming closer together. And I think this is a really exciting and unique opportunity, because the point is not allowing other departments to do work. We want them to do more of this customer facing. Like, we want, if that means somebody in sales thinks about what is an experience that a customer of mine would like, that builds customer empathy. And I think that builds what we may call product thinking. So I'm all for it. And I think one thing we can say with the advent of AI for sure is that experimentation and testing became really cheap. So let's test more. Let's empower everybody, anybody in the company with a good idea to test something, but in a safe way, right? I think it's about the blast zone. And I think that's what is important we keep in mind. Obviously, there are very important mechanics that go into scaling something. Even when we in product do it, we need to, releasing a prototype is very, very different from releasing the scalable solution at the end of it. So I think as long as we find ways of empowering folks with ideas to test, to go forward, to get that evidence of whether an idea really hits the nail on the head or is actually not viable, I think we should absolutely empower them to do so.
Totally agree. But going back to my leadership operating system here, I think if you haven't been in a situation where you managed your relationships to C-level, other departments, tech and your PMs very well, then you were potentially trying to force the mindset of product owns it all, product knows how to do it, and we have to educate everyone on how to do it properly, right? And I think that costs a lot of trust, actually. And because of that, you will have even harder times today. Because if your mindset is, I need to educate everyone to do things the way that we do things in product, you lost them ages ago. So now AI comes, now they are empowered, now they can do things. What happens? Everyone goes nuts, everyone is trying things, and you're too late to the party because you just tried to educate everyone instead of trying to find common ground. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I do see many of my fellow product leaders doing. They are in an educate mindset and not in a common ground mindset. And that's where you do lose the other people. That's where you do become a bottleneck. And that's where they, at some point in time, start ignoring you and just do stuff. And because they do stuff, your PMs go all nuts. They are stressed out 10 times more than ever before. Your therapy sessions become more intense. Your self-confidence lacks, like the wheel spins 10 times faster. So investing in all of these relations and shifting from I have to educate everyone and I have the final say towards like, what do we want to achieve together and how can we find common grounds to enable all of the teams? That is the mindset you need to shift into fast, super fast now.
Wow. I have nothing else to say on this. I completely agree. I do wonder if it is different in different industries, if the ability for kind of people to have that that vibe coding drive, that and even that ability is different in different industries. So I'm thinking of something that's highly, highly kind of technical or very, very regular. I'm thinking banking sector, a lot of it is much more infrastructure based as opposed to pretty front ends and things like that. But I think the concept is still the same regardless, that we have not sufficiently nurtured that relationship enough, and now we're at a period whereby we need to regain that. As product folk as a whole, that's something that we need to start to really focus on and claw back a little bit. Any final thoughts
Yeah.
from either of you?
Totally agree with you. But I don't think that industry is the determinant factor here. It's rather the company maturity. The company is super mature. They might be more likely to start experimenting with things. That's brilliant, right? If they are in an industry where compliance is super important, they might be regulated so heavily that anyways the entire organization is just allowed to use ChatGPT, if even, right? And that's it. I think no one is vibe coding in these companies. Lucky them, because no more herding cats. No one can explore the opportunities of AI. At the same time, they might lose to competition in that specific setup, actually. But it's also a question of leadership. If you have very, very risk prone leaders that are just thriving for innovation, that are willing to be bolder, bigger, faster than everyone before, you might be even more empowered across the entire organization to just fail and learn, right? If your organization is prone to not allow failures at all, right? Then potentially no one is trying to experiment with any tools at all. If you are under revenue pressure, you're not going to experiment with funny AI tools because you're just trying to secure your current business. So I think it's not really just industry. It's the entire ecosystem the organization is operating in, from mindset to culture to industry to EBITDA expectations to board to market to whatever. And so you can't compare any company to the other one.
Agreed. I think one thing we can probably say with a good deal of confidence is that I think previously it was still fairly possible to have a decently good career as a product leader, maybe even CPO, simply being reacting to what was happening around you, just making sure the ship was moving forward in any sort of given direction. I think that time is coming to a close. And I think it's actually because with the empowerment that AI brings to the entire organization, what becomes more and more important is strategic leadership, right? This ability to say, this is where we're going. This is what's important to our company. this is why, and this is how we'll know we'll have been successful. And I think setting that direction is what it's a non-negotiable. If you want to unite people under one banner, one mission, I think that's what leadership has to look like now.
Totally agree. And I think it's not just strategic, it's also confident and focused leadership as well.
Fabulous. I think that's an absolutely perfect time to end and a perfect note to end on. So thank you, Stephanie. That's it, everybody, today. I would absolutely like to thank Stephanie, our very special guest, for joining us today on this incredible episode. Stephanie, you have a very interesting few months ahead of you as you in all of your different ventures. So best of luck to you on. Please do everybody connect with us on LinkedIn. Thank you everybody watching today, and Antonia and I will look forward to welcoming you on the next episode of the Product Opscast. Thank you everybody.